begin. Hello, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Guzman, and this podcast is the first one in a series called Let's Talk About It, where we are going to be talking about issues of mental health to try to help break the stigma surrounding it. So, this first episode is focused on being diagnosed bipolar. Myself, I am bipolar 1, and my guest Sophia is bipolar 2. So, we are kind of different ends of the spectrum, but we both have the same disorder. And today we're hoping to just share some pieces of our story and to talk about some resources that we utilized after we were diagnosed so that anyone listening or watching may be able to utilize those resources as well. Before we begin though, I did want to acknowledge that Sophia's photo is a sunflower. Just for anonymity and confidentiality, we're using a pseudonym today and an image of a sunflower instead of actual video. And this is just to protect Sophia's identity, just because especially mental health can be a difficult topic to talk about, and we wanted to make sure that we made everyone as comfortable as possible. But everything shared is 100% true, and it's speaking to our own stories. So just to begin, I'll introduce myself again, and then I'll have Sophia introduce herself. So my name is Jocelyn Guzman. I'm 24 years old, and I'm currently living in Modesto, California, which is actually where I was born and raised. I'm currently unemployed right now, but I'm getting my master's degree at Claremont Graduate University, and I'm getting my degree in community engaged education and social change. And so this podcast is actually part of my final capstone project, where I'm trying to utilize the community, social media, to show that we can connect and talk about these issues that impede people from getting to their graduation. And by addressing mental health, my argument is that through community, we can persist to graduation. And so, as I said, I'm currently 24 years old. I was actually diagnosed bipolar last October 2020 when I was 24. And so that's just a little bit about me. And now I'll turn it over to Sophia. Sophia, if you could share a little bit about yourself, when you were diagnosed, how old you are right now, what you do for work, what do you enjoy doing in your free time? Just tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I am Sophia. I promise I'm a person, not a sunflower or a cat. I am currently 30, and when I was around 22 years old, I was first diagnosed with bipolar type 2. Right now, I live in Northern California, and I work with foster youth. In my free time, I really love to cook. I love floral design. Being a flower every now and then is a very unique opportunity. I love playing video games, and I also love Japanese culture.
Yes, I'm so excited to talk to you today. I forgot to say what I like to do with my free time. I am beginning to like cooking. I'm new to it. And I also really like creating like social media content for my personal pages. So later on today, I'm going to link my mental health social media. But in my free time, I really like having fun, making TikToks, just doing fun content like that. So I guess to begin, now that we know a little bit about ourselves, I wanted to just dive into what it was like to be diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So again, I am bipolar disorder type 1, which means I have mania or kind of periods of time where I have hyper energy, followed by periods of depression and anxiety. So I was diagnosed, as I said, in October of 2020, which was last year, after I had a full manic episode. So throughout the whole year of 2020, I kind of realized my moods were a little unstable, and I was having what I called manias, where there were periods of time for days where I just wouldn't sleep and I wouldn't eat, and I found myself late at night. I don't know if you've done this, Sophia, but taking like mental health disorder tests to try to figure out what was going on with me. Have you ever done that before?
I taken with being a psychology major in college, we've had to take a look, but I definitely didn't quite get it back then, but I would have really liked a quiz that would have given me a heads up.
Yes, I mean, I know quizzes are not promoted by psychologists and psychiatrists as like a diagnosis, but it was just me trying to figure out what was going on with me. I found myself just engulfed with projects. So there was this one project that I kept telling everyone, I'm working on this project. And what I ended up doing was actually, I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment, which was a small space. and I took everything I owned, all my clothing, all of my like cards and letters, that postcards that anyone's ever sent me, and I laid everything out around my room. And there's pictures of this time, and it looked like a complete mess. My entire bed was covered in things, my entire floor, my entire table, my entire bedroom just became this project. And the goal of this project was to document and tell my whole life story using music. And so I would kind of go over a part of the floor or the bed, and then I would kind of sing a song like in the background that would tell
Mm-hmm.
that part of my story. And so it was just, it looked to me, it was very organized. In my mania, I knew exactly what was happening, but to anyone looking in, it looked like someone from like a movie going crazy. Um, and that's kind of what it looked like. And I was supposed to go up to Modesto, California. I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and I kept missing my flight. I just would buy a new flight ticket, but then I couldn't stop the project. Like it was consuming me. And so my cousin ended up picking me up from Los Angeles and driving me home to Modesto so I could attend a wedding. And this was late at night. It was probably around 12 or 1 in the morning once we finally left. And then I got to Modesto around, 6 a.m., didn't sleep, and then just got ready for the wedding. And I went to this wedding and people could tell I was manic. Even one person came up to me and was like, "Are you manic right now?" And I was like, "Yes, I am." So I just knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what. And then that night it got worse. It just kind of took a really sharp turn. I went to sleep and I was laying next to my boyfriend on the couch of this like house, and I just started aggressively jolting. I couldn't control it. I would feel like I was asleep. I'd be snoring, my eyes would be closed, but I was awake, and I could remember like seeing myself come out of my body and move. And then I'd wake up, my boyfriend would wake me up, and I'd be in a different part of the room. And it was just very scary. I felt like I had no control over my body. The aggressive jolts were just getting worse. I had bruises all over my legs. They were unexplained, probably from days of, I think that I was alone for a couple days, and I imagine that I was still doing this before, I was sleeping next to my boyfriend. And so he
Mm-hmm.
ended up driving me home that morning. The next morning, I checked myself into the emergency room. I was so scared. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't stop the shaking from happening. I just needed some help. So I went to the emergency room, and I was checked in with a mental health check-in. And the doctor and and I had a social worker assigned to me, and they were kind of discussing if they were going to diagnose me 5150 and institutionalize me or not. And they ultimately decided not to. And they decided to just give me some medicine and try to get me to sleep. And so the goal was, if you get some rest, hopefully this will take you out of your manic episode. And so I went to sleep for I think like 13 hours, and then they actually did release me, but they said you need to get a psychiatrist, and you need to start really taking care of your mental health. So the following week I went to my primary care doctor, and then I went to a psychiatrist, and then I was diagnosed with bipolar 1. And so that's kind of my whole diagnosis story. And this all happened while I was a student at Claremont Graduate University. So at the time, my studies really fell behind for me. I kept enrolled that semester, but I was just a complete disaster. And I actually emailed a bunch of people and just at my school and said, "Hi, I'm going through this time. I'm diagnosed with bipolar 1. And it's just, here's where I'm at." And thankfully, the people at the school really worked with me. I ended up getting accommodations to finish out that semester, but it was really just such a difficult time for me. And so that's what my experience was like. What about you, Sophia? What was your experience like?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment a little bit before I go into my story.
Yeah.
One thing that I was just really impressed with was just how open you were, as I was a recipient of that email, and I was just really touched with how open you were about your time. Because for me, I made it a big secret and I didn't tell people, and most people thought I was on vacation for the semester. I wasn't in school. So I just
And
think
that's okay too. Like neither one is the right thing. I think people in my life always tell me you overshare too much, Jocelyn. So maybe some secrecy would be nice. But thank you. Yeah, I just felt led to tell people that I was going through this tough time.
Yeah, and I do think if we can, I know there's a lot of stigma around mental illness, but being open is just something that helps. So I'm really glad to be on this podcast sharing my experience. So I'll talk a little bit about my story now. So I was an upperclassman in college, and this was fall, and I had broken up with a boyfriend over the summer. Yeah, that was, unfortunate, but we hadn't dated very
Rough.
long. It wasn't really a huge deal. But, I was returning to the same roommates, the same job, the same major, ministry, friend group. Everything in my life, for the most part, was exactly the same. But I just felt perplexed by this exorbitant amount of anxiety I was feeling. I'd never felt like this in my whole life. And I really felt like I was being chased by like some
Wow.
invisible phantom. I couldn't sleep. I felt myself choking on this panic and malaise. And I just had never felt that way before. I was a very outgoing, social, extroverted person, very down to earth, and I'd say pretty happy go lucky. But here I was sleepless, I was terrified of something unknown and sinister that I felt chased by. And after a few weeks of this going on, I went to the counseling office and they said, "You are severely depressed." And I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
didn't
like what
really
does
know
this
that.
mean?
But okay, so I started to take some medicine. And after having a poor reaction to the Zoloft, and when I say poor, I mean paradoxical. So that means instead of getting better, I got worse. I got suicidal. I got even more depressed. And all psychiatric medications have a black box warning which tells you about that. So that is a possible symptom. So after that experience, I was prescribed the brand name of Seroquel and Lamictal. So at this point, I did take a medical withdrawal from school. It wasn't something I planned or wanted to do, but looking back, I'm really glad I did. So I went back to
Yeah.
my hometown to recover. And at this point, I was very dark, very depressed, and my counselor, she told me that the medicine would be like a dimmer switch. So what that means is things wouldn't just all of a sudden be bright and better, but over time, things would get brighter and easier. And honestly, I did not believe her at the time. I just thought this was like going to be like this forever and everyone else was full of it.
Yeah.
But slowly and over time, I really started to feel better and feel more like myself. So, with some good counseling, support, medicine, I returned to school. And then actually, I ended up transferring out to California, where I also completed my education at CGU in psychology and education.
And I'm so glad that you felt in yourself that you needed to take a break, because I think knowing that about yourself is so incredibly empowering. Like to just hear your story, to know that you decided, I'm going to really take care of my mental health. That just really inspires me as someone who sometimes struggles to pause and do what is best for
Mhm.
myself. Like I love that part of your story. And thank you for sharing about medication as well. I'm sorry that you went through such a rough time with that like feeling of being chased. I can relate to the sleepless nights, but I can't relate specifically to that feeling, and it just must have been so scary.
Yeah, I know something with my diagnosis. When I was diagnosed with bipolar, I wasn't so sure if that diagnosis fixed. I'm like, where's the mania? Where's this feeling euphoric and great? Why do I feel so anxious? But
Yeah.
it wasn't honestly till later in college did I experience like any of the mania. I would, stay up all night to work on a paper, and then I would feel just this wonderful, bubbly, creative, and talkative, fun, sensual person. And I literally, you had someone at a wedding point out, "Hey, are you manic?" I had one of my psychology friends point something like that out, and I'm like,
Really?
"Oh, yeah, of course I am," and I was joking about it, but I really was. So I do understand the irony when people point out how you're doing.
Yes, and you're saying that you were wondering like where's the mania for myself? I'm bipolar type 1, and I've never really experienced like a deep depression. It kind of I started experiencing like depression here and there starting in like 2019. But it was always like more mania, more excessive
Mhm.
energy, more excitement. And then once I really checked myself in because of the manic episode, when I was at the end, that's when I really started feeling like the thoughts of like not wanting to be alive. It wasn't
Mhm.
necessarily wanting to kill myself, but it was I didn't want to do this anymore. I was tired, I
Mhm.
was depressed, I was done. And so, I can relate to going back and forth between the two, and sometimes they're stronger, sometimes they're less. But whenever you spoke about your medications in particular, I'm kind of new to this. So, I barely was diagnosed less than 6 months ago. And so I'm new to the medication journey. And for myself, like I am kind of thinking like you were at the beginning, like, is this going to work? Like, I kind of don't believe what people are saying, but right now I'm trusting in my psychiatrist. And so
Mm-hmm.
I've tried a lot of different medications. And we're really trying to find the right ones. I started off with what was called lamotrigine and risperidone. And kind of like you with your first round of medications, that made everything worse. Like my psychosis started getting really bad. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't sleep at night. I felt like I was dizzy at night in my sleep and I couldn't stop spinning. So we got off of those. And then I tried ketamine. I don't know I believe this is the one that you're on the brand name, right?
Yeah, quetiapine.
Quetiapine, yes. So I tried that, but that for a month just made me feel really depressed. Like I felt like my mania was completely turned off and my depression was turned on to 1,000. And so that wasn't the pills for me. And so, but I did start taking the anti-nightmare medicine at this time. It was called prazosin. And prazosin really helped me because for like a year straight, I was having nightmares every single night. And once I started prazosin, my nightmares went away. So I was like, okay, even though I'm getting discouraged, like on this whole medication thing, I see that once you find the right medicine, it does help. So I kept
Mm-hmm.
going.
Right.
Um, and then I took Saffris, which is a mood stabilizer, and then Escitalopram, which is an antidepressant. And that was going pretty well. I did feel more tired though. Like a lot of the times I'd woke up and I just was exhausted. And I think maybe I was so used to mania that I didn't know how to respond to just normal levels of energy. But
Mm-hmm.
those were the best kind of so far. But then unfortunately, I couldn't continue on the Saffris because it was too expensive. So I switched to bupropion, which is an antidepressant, and then olanzapine, which is a mood stabilizer. So those are the two medications I'm currently on. It's been probably a month and a half, and I'm doing the best that I've done so far on medication. And so I'm still hesitant to like believe that medications are like going to help 100%. But like you said, it's a dimmer switch. It's not immediately you're going to take this and be happy and feel 100%, but it takes time. So I meet with my psychiatrist again in April to see if we need to adjust my medications at all. But I'm glad that like I'm finally on some medications that feel good. And what really helped me actually stay taking my medications was a book that you sent me. And so this book is called An Unquiet Mind, a Memoir of Moods and Madness by Kay Redfield Jamison. And in the book, the author actually is bipolar herself, and she talks about her medication journey. And so do you want to tell me a little bit about why you sent me that book and, why you like Kay Redfield Jamison?
Yes, I could talk about her forever, but I'll keep it shorter. So, I would say one of the most pivotal aspects of what has shaped my view of bipolar disorder and consequently myself is the life and work of Dr. Kay Redfield Jameson. So, she is both one, the world's leading authority, and she also wrote the DSM or the Diagnostic Statistical Manual section on this illness. So,
Which
one of my
that you told me that, and that was amazing to me.
yeah, she's got instant cred right there. So, one of my favorite books, due to her ability, she knows how to combine poetry with science. And if you want to know what that looks like, this is a book for you. So, in her memoir, An Unquiet Mind, she shares her life story and her own very personal diagnosis with bipolar disorder. So, although she was a clinical faculty teaching students about mental illness, she didn't know she had bipolar herself. So, when I was in college, I was a psychology major at that point, and it made me feel a lot better about knowing that I didn't have it, not knowing that I had it. So, she also discussed in detail her significant personal struggle with taking medicine as prescribed. So, Dr. Jamin said the number one issue with bipolar disorder is medical compliance, which means
Yes.
people start feeling better and then they don't want to take the medicine anymore. And that makes sense. If you're taking an aspirin or antibiotics, you take it until, you feel better and then you stop. But that's not how mood stabilizers and antidepressants work. They still need to be there to keep you feeling good and stable. So, in her book, there was a line that every time you start and stop a medication, that can actually decrease its effectiveness. And that is the
Yeah.
very reason I've taken my medicine as prescribed for the last 8 years, and I plan, honestly, to do for the rest of my life. So,
Yes.
what I find so inspiring about this book is she didn't let her disorder hold her back, but she's contributed so much to the world and just the understanding of mental illness, especially related to decreasing the stigma about it. So, she's one of my heroes. She's gone in a few of my grad school statements. I think she's amazing. One of my professors from college actually went to school with her at the same time at
Oh,
UCLA, which
wow.
was really cool. Um, yeah, and I thought I would just add a little bit to that about my own kind of medicine foray. So after taking Zoloft very unsuccessfully, I transferred over to the brand name of Seroquel and Lamictal. So in the last few years, for financial reasons, I transferred to the generic, and there hasn't been a problem with that. And just so it would
Yay.
kind of be covered by my current insurance. And then the last year, with the support of my psychiatrist, I went off Lamictal. So right now, I'm only taking the generic of Seroquel. But basically, what I feel like medicine does and why I plan to continue to take it is it makes the lows less low and it makes the duration shorter. Things that used to just upset me for weeks or days sometimes only last evening. I feel like my
Yeah.
emotions in general are just better regulated and I just get a lot less upset about things.
Yes, I'm glad that you're having those positive effects and like hearing that you've stuck with it. You have consistently taken it for 8 years now. Like that's just so amazing to me. And it makes me feel like once I continue taking mine consistently, that it's going to be like that for me. I mean, it's only been a couple months so far, and I'm still new to the medicine, but like you're saying, you used to kind of have long periods of time where you'd feel low. For myself, like I had long periods of time where I felt manic. And I'm not like that. Every single night, the biggest difference is I get sleep on a daily basis. And my whole life growing up, like I remember being in high school and only getting 2 hours sleep a night. And so I'm like really appreciative of the fact that I'm getting sleep consistently. My moods aren't as erratic. Like I'm not switching moods as much. I'm not going from like a really low to a really high. And so I'm hoping that I continue taking my medicines as well. That's been my biggest takeaway from the book so far. I'm still not done reading it, but just hearing, her describe her journey with medications and not wanting to take them. Um, it makes me feel more normal. It makes me feel like,
Mhm.
okay, I'm not the only one that struggles with this, but I want to keep doing this because I know it's right for me. And for myself too, once I started taking medications, I actually stopped using substances. So I was actually heavily using alcohol and marijuana. And so ever since then, ever since I got on medications, just to make sure I was, doing what I was supposed to do, well, what the psychiatrist told me to do was to stop using the substances as well. And so my sobriety journey actually aligns with my medication journey. And so now I've been sober for almost 5 months now, which is,
Fantastic.
yes, I know, exciting. And then in another later podcast, I'm actually going to talk with someone else who struggled with alcohol abuse, and substance abuse. So we'll talk more about that later. But I just share that because I think that a big thing I've learned about people with bipolar disorder is that we use alcohol and substances at higher rates to try to like self cope. And so I'm really leaning into like scientists and knowledge and not leaning so much into myself right now. Um, but yeah, I just got to keep reading the book and keep using like resources like you and others. And so, um, thank you for the book. Thank you for being my friend so that I can use you as a resource. But what resources would you say that you have used in addition to medication and friends and this book to help you?
Yeah, I'd love to talk more about that. So, a big one would be the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. I know that's a resource
Yes.
you've used as well. So I just think it's great because you can call that number at any time, any
Mhm.
day. Never have to worry like, okay, well, if I went to a friend, like, what would they think, or a family member?
Yes.
Sometimes you're like, I don't want to involve my social circle. I just want support without,
Yes.
anything. So they're a great organization to call. And just so you guys have that number, it's 1-800-273-8255. 8255. And honestly, so outside of medicine, which I would say would be the most influential support, I would say I've been seeing a counselor basically every other week for nearly a decade. So minus the
Nice.
summers when I go abroad. And one nice thing about being in college or graduate school, counseling is usually totally free. So I really encourage anyone to use the resources that are available. And the waiting time is usually more like 2 weeks or less rather than 3 to 4 weeks with a private office.
Yeah.
So the one thing you need to keep in mind is that some schools have a limit on the number of sessions. Sometimes it's like 10 to 12 before they refer you out. I know in my undergrad in Wisconsin, I saw the same person for like 2 years. So it really
Nice.
depends on the school and the organization, and your insurance situation as well. So keep that in mind. But your school has free services, and I encourage you to use them. Um, and that would be some of the major resources that I've used.
Awesome. Yeah, I also have used medication now. Like you said, the suicide prevention hotline, what I've called them a lot. Like whenever I'm really low and I just need someone to immediately talk to, they're always there. And what I love about the suicide prevention hotline is that for me, they've always pointed me to resources. So whenever I've gotten off the phone with them, they tell me to go to like psychologytoday.com, and psychologytoday.com has like articles you can read that are educational. They have links to psychiatrists, so you can actually put in your insurance information and like your area and search for like a psychiatrist or a psychologist in your area. And this is how you can find like specialty therapists. And then they also point me to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI, which is a really
Mm-hmm.
big organization. And there's lots of resources on the NAMI website. I'll link it in the description below. They have information on support groups, therapists, counselors, um, a lot of educational materials as well. So I really thank the Suicide Prevention Hotline for connecting me there. And like you, I've also been in therapy. I first started therapy in sixth grade through my school. My elementary school was just like the school counselor. And then I stopped for a while. And then in undergrad, I utilized my free services, like you're saying, to do some sessions with the therapist there. And then after, since closer to my diagnosis, I actually was sexually assaulted, but I went to a sexual assault treatment center, and I started seeing a specific sexual assault therapist as well. And so she has been amazing. She's still my therapist to this day. And she's really helped me a lot through this diagnosis as well. So I would definitely recommend therapists, medication, like the suicide prevention line, Psychology Today, NAMI. And then a really big resource that I utilize, just because I talk so openly about my mental illness, is my community. And so I have a whole social media channel documenting my mental health journey. It's called @Jocelyn's Journey. I'll also link that in the description below. But my community is very strong and very supportive. So even on days where I'm feeling low, I can just post on my Instagram and share, a story that like, hey, I'm just needing support right now. And I can rely on my community to send me encouraging messages. Or, even like you, I can reach out to you, Sophia, and you will just be there for me and help me through a difficult time. So I'm very thankful for my community and those in my community who are Christian as well. I am a Christian myself, and prayer is so important to me. My spirituality, my faith is so important. And so my community also prays for me, and that nourishes me and takes care of me as well. So those are some resources I utilize. Did you want to share anything else, Sophia? We're kind of getting to the end of the podcast.
Well, I'm just thankful for any listeners who have joined us this entire time. And I think if we can encourage you to do one thing, it would be to reach out. Maybe
Yes.
you're not ready to talk to your friends or family, but talk to a hotline, talk to a counselor. There's so many students, young adults facing mental illness that goes untreated, and that's something that's really unfortunate. So we really hope that just by sharing our stories, that can give you more insight, more information, and just give you that little push to put yourself out there. You don't have to tell the whole world, you don't have to do a
No.
podcast, but you can at least reach out to a hotline or counselor that's there to support you. We're going through a pandemic. This
Yes.
is a really stressful time. People are having limited social interactions, they're losing jobs, they're losing opportunities. I think mental health has become even more of a priority. So I really
Yes.
just hope that we can encourage you to reach out.
Yes, please reach out. That's why we're doing the podcast today. We wouldn't get on here and talk to you for, all this time without just trying to say like you're not alone. I think that that's a huge thing is you're not by yourself. You have community, even if you don't know us in real life. You have us here online. You can connect with me anytime through my social media. You can reach out to professionals and just know that you are not by yourself. Like we're all a part of this together.
Definitely. Thank you, Jocelyn, for being a wonderful host and having me today. A
Sophia, thank
sunflower,
you for
cat,
being
or person.
thank you for being the best guest and starting off this podcast right. So, stay tuned. There's going to be more in the series, this Let's Talk About It series. But for today, that concludes our conversation on bipolar disorder. I hope you have a great day, Sophia, and take care of yourself.
You too, Jocelyn. Thank you, listeners.
Thank you. Bye.